Hello and welcome back to Retro Ranger. Today we're going to talk about... Okay, stop it. Today we're going to talk about clone games. Games that look and feel very similar to another popular title previously released. Yeah, and sometimes those clone games are even more successful than the original. But oftentimes, people only get to experience one of them and have no basis for comparison at all. That's right, and there's a ton of them, so we're going to start with a handful of good ones today. Let's jump in. Okay, first game up on our list is Vanarch for the PlayStation 1. At first glance, you can easily see the connection I'm about to make to Star Fox, which, even the second and more popular game of the series, Star Fox 64, came out a whopping 3 years before it in 1997. There are a lot of influences, we'll call them, to Star Fox, but also to Panzer Dragoon as well, which also would be before this in 1995. The main gameplay loop will have you in the seat of a starship with mostly an on-rails experience to shoot down enemies and their projectiles, avoid environmental hazards, and of course take down bosses. Where this deviates from Star Fox is between these on-rail shooter parts. You gain control of the main character and get to run around the ship, progressing what could be considered ample story and plot when continuing the comparison with Star Fox. I like this part of the game quite a bit as it just feels PlayStation-era gaming to me, right down to the tank controls. While I'm in the vast minority and enjoy the tank controls of a game like, say, Resident Evil, they're just poorly implemented here, and I have no defense for them. Though, while we're talking about Resident Evil, check out these doors! Man, these guys can't stop themselves from stealing. That said, you can muster up the energy to ignore the controls, I promise you, and still have a lot of fun exploring the ship and apparently catching your shipmates in the shower? Oh right, it's in the future, and if movies and television have taught me anything, it's that, in the future, there's no such thing as modesty. Anyways, back to the action. The shooter levels all feel really great, and the performance of the game in general will have you scratching your head since it's in the PlayStation 1. The controls of the ship feel very fluid, and the slowdown, speed up, homing missiles, etc. are all intuitively mapped to the controller. The graphics are impressive, and the alien landscapes capture me here as much as they did in both Star Fox and Panzer Dragoon. Of course, you can't have these sorts of games and not have a boss, right? There's actually bosses and mini-bosses here to enjoy. While you don't get to switch to a fenced-in free range that you'd get in, let's say, Star Fox 64, this works too, and the bosses appropriately act as a test of your skills, with tons of enemies and projectiles flying toward the screen. Here's an honest question. Has anyone even heard of this game? Dare I say it? I mean, am I allowed to say it? Oh, this is a hidden gem. Seriously, it's fantastic. Very underrated. Perhaps it went under the radar being only 6 months before the PlayStation 2 launched. Either way, snatch this one up. Okay, next up is the Cryon Conquest for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Can you believe it's been only one episode since the last time we had to talk about a Mega Man clone? 4 years after the Mega Man originally came out and was released, we got the Cryon Conquest, which follows a lot of the same game mechanics such as the run-and-gun platformer, shooting projectiles, and swapping between power-ups. You can see a lot of similarity in the level design for sure, and when you're not hot-swapping power-ups to progress through them, it'll feel right at home for the Mega Man players out there. Graphically, it's pretty good, and there's a lot on screen, and rarely is there any sprite flickering or slowdown. The power-ups are fun once you get the hang of them, and you'll be flying around your broom in no time. The physics are just as tight, and it's hard to complain about the mechanics themselves. Where you can complain will be in the difficulty. This one is hard, and with the limited continues, it won't be long before you're yelling at the TV. I mean, it's not my fault I keep dying, right? Wait, what's that? Oh, I see. It is my fault. And I should get good. Okay, fair enough. Back to the game, another few differences worth calling out is that, like our Shockman comparison video, there's no level selection or just you get progression in a very linear fashion. Beyond that, the power-ups you already have, and you will just start the game with those, and so you won't be accruing anymore. While I mentioned the difficulty, it's combined with some pretty unfortunate death traps like this one at the very start of Stage 2. And it's a shame, right? Because it doesn't need to resort to it to have a challenging experience, and it feels like it just takes away from the overall enjoyment. Overall, despite the often punishing difficulty, it's worth checking out as it mixes in some light puzzling with the fast action, and it all works pretty well together. And with that, another Mega Man clone is complete. Let's move on. Okay, next up is Diddy Kong Racing for the Nintendo 64. Yeah, it's an attempt to cash in on the kart craze, and I could have put Crash Team Racing in this slot as well, but I don't care. I love this game, and I'd pick it over Mario Kart 64 any day. Don't get me wrong, I'm no heathen, I also really enjoy Mario Kart, but come on. Karts, boats, and planes, boss fights, challenges, secrets, big anthropomorphic pigs, and the best music for any kart race ever. That's right, I said it, let's fight. We talked about this game in our N64 Market Trends video, and I probably mentioned it elsewhere because I can't seem to shut up about my love for it, but it's true, there's definitely some cloning going on here. At the end of the day, despite there being a magnificent adventure mode and overworld connecting the racetracks together, it is all about racing around a track, aiming and arming yourself with weapons and power-ups, hitting those turbos and blasting your way into first place. The kart racing formula just works, and it's great here too, of course. Like any good clone, it also extends and improves upon ones that came before it, and I mentioned a few of those improvements already, such as the bosses and unlockable characters, but my favorite growing up was just finding the secret keys in each world that take some of the adventure into the actual races themselves.
Lap 2.
The courses and worlds are all so unique and fun to play over and over. The layouts will sometimes require a specific vehicle, but other times you can play it as any of the three, which is even more impressive to see the versatility. Overall, if you've not played this, I genuinely think you're missing out, but perhaps it's just my nostalgia hitting me right in the feels. Let's move on. Alright, next up on our list is Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine for the Nintendo 64. So, what game is this one a clone of? Maybe a bit of a stretch, but I'm going to call it a clone of Tomb Raider, specifically the early ones in the series. And before you shrug off my comparison too quickly, it's worth covering why I feel this way to be true. The biggest reason is that the character control and movement mechanics. The incident I played this game and just moved Indy around and climbed up my first cliff, it's the first thing that popped into my head. This is Tomb Raider. It's a bit hard to explain, but that feeling is rooted in a clunky 3D platformer that really revolves around some aspects of realism and character locomotion. Grabbing ledges with explicit actions to pull yourself up or crawl along the ledges or drop, provide that, and all while fighting with the camera, and that certainly reminds me of the early Tomb Raider games. While realism is represented with movement, it was a design decision to remove it from the other areas like shooting your gun. There's no ammo or reloading needed, which, if we're keeping score, Tomb Raider 2 removes the ammo realism here as well.
Стой!
Of course, a more obvious comparison is the fact that you're platforming through, well, tombs. And to be fair though, this is a staple of the Indy IP, but it doesn't do itself any favors in separating itself from the aforementioned Tomb Raider games either. I'll be really honest for a second. When I popped this in, I hated it. The camera, the controls, the lack of context all hits you right in the face upon starting this. But the more time I played with it and progressed, the more I really started to enjoy it. It feels like an Indiana Jones story, and it's analogous to how GoldenEye is on the same system. That too feels like you're in a James Bond movie.
Physics Institute. He thinks there's some truth to the biblical legend.
Isn't he a godless communist?
He's a physicist who studies manifolds and hyperspace, quirky theoretical stuff.
Now what's a guy like that doing in Babylon?
The story and style, once you get in a bit at least, will have you humming the theme music and enjoying solving puzzles and taking part in the action, like jumping on top of this military truck to hitch a ride through the security checkpoint, for instance.
Стой! Стой!
Two issues I have with this game are the jumps are deceptively makeable, though most are at the utmost distance possible and somehow you can still make it. If you get stuck, it's likely possible that the cliff ledge on the other side of the planet is where you need to go next. The second is the quality. Your model will often clip through the walls like this is the first time 3D was attempted, or one of the worst bugs that I saw was getting stuck in the floor where Indy's right leg grew 3 sizes too big, and I was unable to do anything, not even pause the game. It forced me to restart and lose my progress. Gripes aside, I have a newfound respect for this N64 entry, and I will be brushing it off in the future to see how this original story in the Indiana Jones series concludes. Let's move on.
Whoa.
Next up is Bug Fables: The Everlasting Sapling on the Nintendo Switch. While the last game may have been a bit of a stretch with its comparison, you'd have a hard time defending this next one. From the graphical paper styling of the art to the gameplay mechanics as a quirky, comical, and light turn-based RPG with platforming and puzzles sprinkled in, it's abundantly clear where Bug Fables got its inspiration. Of course, I'm talking about Paper Mario. Now, we talked about Paper Mario during our N64 Market Trends video because it was really a solid game at a decent price, but if you're looking for a similar experience, or perhaps the same experience as we'll talk about, this game should definitely be on your radar. While it won't feature any of our beloved Nintendo cast, of course, it does introduce its own, consisting of different bugs from the Bug Kingdom. The dialogue, like that of its inspiration, is rooted in comical banter between the different and fun personalities. The similarities won't stop there either, however, as you'll be traversing the world in a very similar structure, down to the small screen chunks that feature three-dimensional layouts. Like Paper Mario, enemies here too can be seen and avoided, or even preemptively attacked to give you an advantage in the actual combat. This again will look and play familiar, including the unique controls like timed button presses to defend better or character-specific attacks. For example, one character has to attack by timing a meter in the green section of the bar, whereas another is holding crouch until a varying time pattern is up to release it. Like in Paper Mario, this adds some real-time fun to the class turn-based experience. Low damage numbers, near identical 3-choice power-ups on level-ups, near identical items, and similar battle mechanics are all here, and you will feel like you're back in a Paper Mario game before they just went off a cliff in the later releases. Overall, I think it's a very serious homage to the wonderful origins of Super Mario RPG and Paper Mario, which having more of is never a bad thing. Okay, next up is the latest entry in the Record of Lotus War series. This one is called Record of Lotus War Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth, and it's on the Nintendo Switch. While there's not a common genre for the series, this entry clearly falls in the Metroidvania style, and will be very reminiscent of the amazing Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Everything down to the movement tech, including the backdash, the trailing sprite fade, the HP and MP upgrades, false walls, save points, map systems, gateways, and so much more. There is some new aspects beyond the content and the story built upon the framework, like switching between wind and fire spirits, which lets Deedlit pass through areas or absorb enemy attacks of the matching type. If you've ever played Ikaruga on the GameCube, it's the same concept, just in a Metroidvania package. The graphics are fantastic for the pixel art style, along with the music, though the latter isn't going to scratch the surface of what you'll recall from Symphony of the Night. The physics, though, are tight, and the unlockable abilities such as double jump, sliding, and others will all feel very satisfying as you continue your journey. The story, though, is just okay, perhaps worse. If you're into the Record of Lotus lore, perhaps it's wonderful, but since I'm not, I felt like the game does a poor job in catching me up. The size of the map, though, is great, and backtracking never feels terrible, especially with the gateway system. The bosses are all fun and provide a good amount of challenge, including the end boss. Enemy difficulty ramps up well, but there's definitely some areas that are just an absolute pain to get through with a knockback as well. Like Symphony of the Night, you'll be collecting tons of weapons, including bows, which is a nice add and the source of some cool puzzling, and you do this by ricocheting your shots around the room to trigger a way through it. Moreover, item shops will be scattered around to help you refill your health or MP on demand, or buy some upgrades. Overall, I don't think there's much originality in this game, but rather it seems to take a lot of strong mechanics from others and mash them together. It works well, but I think some level of bringing something new to the table would have still been preferred. That said, it's a solid Metroidvania, and if you're a Castlevania fan of this styling, you're going to definitely feel right at home here. And there you go. Those are just some of the clone games that are out there, and even ones that are still coming out. That's right, and whether those are copycats or just good old inspiration, we'll leave that for you all to decide. Let us know down in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching Retro Ranger. And you know what other game is likely a clone game? No. It's this crazy game on the TurboGrafx called Shockman. It's so much like Mega Man, you wouldn't even believe it. Nope. Wait, hey, where are you going? Well, I can do this by myself. Let's see. Got it. I'll be the Klepto Ranger. Yeah.